Thanks everyone for coming. As I'm British, I'd just like to give another shout out to the weather today. That is mandatory in our culture. So I'm Ollie. Thank you very much for being here. I'm MD and co-founder of Stereo US. We are a culturally charged creative agency. Hopefully you saw the reel just then. I think the thing that unites all of our clients is their desire to cultivate some sort of fandom. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And also, if I look nervous, this is my first ever panel, so I am a little bit. But really, it's these guys who are going to be delivering the goods, so don't worry about me. But I want to spend a moment just to talk about the moment that we're in right now. Obviously, days away from the Super Bowl, super exciting, huge year for sport, as well as the Olympics, the World Cup that's coming to the US. Today is National Girls and Women's Sports Day, in case you didn't know. So, very important moment. Also, in case you didn't know, season 2 of Heated Rivalry is scheduled to start shooting. So, if you know,
They're
you know.
in town this week. If you're walking around and you might see them.
There's another really interesting thing. There's a very interesting statistic that actually I read yesterday, which is that sports is now the #1 activity for shared experiences across the US, and that's above religion and music. So that's 29% of Americans said that that's their #1 thing for shared experience. I think that's pretty profound. I think that frames a lot of what's going on in sports and fandom today, and that we're going to unpack a little bit. So first of all, borderless belonging. So what is borderless belonging? Some of you might have seen the research that we've scattered around the room, and please pick it up if you haven't already. So in partnership with Ideally, what we've done is we've launched a new global study, and instead of asking people about who they support and digging into demographics, what we've done is asked why they care, how they became fans, what stories they see themselves in, and what makes a brand really feel like it truly belongs in their world. So we're going to unpack that today with Lauren and Stephanie. So I'm going to hand it over to these guys just to introduce themselves.
Sure. They already know me.
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. I'm Lauren Duletsky. I'm the co-founder and co-host of Click Clack Media. I also want to shout out my co-host who couldn't be here today. She's a former WNBA player. She's a big part of our brand, and just want to shout her out. So I spent my whole life in marketing on the brand side. Tech and sport have always been my spaces. I played sports through high school. I too did not make it to the pros. I'm 5'1", Jackie is 6'1", so we're an interesting duo together. But I have a deep passion for helping create more representation for women in sports and tech, and that's why we founded Click Clack as a way to do that. And we're young. We started in 2024. Prior to that, I was at Nike. I worked in innovation, led brand marketing and innovation. So deeply love product creation and what it can do, and can't wait for the Olympics to start here because lots of great Nike innovation that's showing up. But yeah, I'm really honored to be here, and there's nothing more that I love to talk about than the fan, especially the women's sports fan.
And I want, as a job for all of you to do right now, is get out your phones, search for Click Clack Pod, and hit subscribe. It is a truly awesome podcast. Fascinating. There are very few podcasts on women's sports, and theirs is one of the best in the world. And actually, that's not just me saying that, that's Sports Journal saying that as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, just a quick stat, if I may. There's 80 women's sports podcasts. There are 23,000 true crime podcasts. And the women's sports podcast space is booming. There are only 12 self-produced podcasts. Ours is one of them. So thank you for the follow.
So today's not going to be a research presentation, so you can relax. It's a conversation where you'll hear from these guys about what's actually going on in this new wave of fandom, and what belonging really looks like, and how brands can actually earn a place in that. So it's a really important topic. The research is the backdrop, but what we're going to look at is who's on the sidelines, which moments actually create belonging, and how brands can add value instead of just badging a moment. So let's start with the people who could be fans but just don't feel like sport is for them yet. So there's a sporting stat here, which is 56% of people in our study follow sport very closely, but there's 16% that sit in what we're calling the fan gap, which is where sport is less embedded in week to week in their lives. So, Lauren, I'm going to turn this one to you, this first question. So, from where you sit in women's sports and the conversations you're having on Click Clack, I'd love to know, like, who do you feel is hovering around the edges of fandom? The people who are curious, that aren't quite in yet. I hate to say the casual fan, but it's like something in that domain. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I love to talk about. And I also want to shout out the NFL, though, specifically, because the women's sports fan, if you are not spending on reaching the women's sports fan, it is a miss. And the NFL has done an incredible job from the men's sports side in really investing in this space. So I want to shout them out. We'll talk more about that later, too. But I'm going to start with a personal story here because I am that person. I worked at Nike, so everybody immediately says, oh, she must know everything about sports. That's not the truth. I grew up in Oregon, so grew up with Phil Knight, the whole Nike story, loved the brand, connected deeply with what sports does for you. I played sports in high school. My sports were track and field and gymnastics. But I felt like, I mean, if you asked me to name a professional team, I might be like, I don't know, maybe the Seahawks, I don't know. And my husband on the other side, biggest sports fan you've ever met. And I always just felt like, I don't really see myself here. And, you know, I'm a really femme woman. I'm not seeing like as many stories about women, like what's going on here? And I had this big insight, and it was actually when Angel Reese went to the Met Gala in 2024. And this is in a time when the WNBA is starting to really catch fire, right? But everybody's kind of like, well, what does this look like? And how do I belong here? And she said to the media at the Met Gala, she said, women aren't one-dimensional and you have to stop treating us that way. And because people were giving her crap for being at the Met Gala, not being on the court. And I think there's been this expectation for athletes that you can't do both. You can't be both. If you're an athlete, you're only an athlete. And women's sports is really challenging that status quo right now. And that's when I knew that as much as I loved working at Nike and being in product, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to help more women like me fall in love with women's sports. I think that's what makes our brand really special is you have a former WNBA player who played in the league and overseas for 10 years. And then you have me who's finally seeing herself, seeing all these different stories that I emotionally connect with. And now I can tell you who the top scorer in NCAA women's basketball is, Audie Crooks. Shout out to her. Because I'm a true fan now. And so I think I would like to challenge all, you know, brands, teams, sports leagues to be thinking about how do you bring someone in from that perspective? Because it's a really powerful way to convert a fan.
And Stephanie, onto you. And if we take this idea of the fan gap from a 49ers perspective, where do you see the biggest opportunity to kind of grow that emotional fan connection?
Yeah, I love listening to Lauren speak because she's so passionate and she's just so knowledgeable. And I think that fan gap and your comment about challenging the status quo that these athletes are so much more than people, it's been going for a long time, right? Like, you know, shut up and play basketball or shut up and play football kind of thing on the men's side as well. And I think, you know, when I think of Borderless belonging, I love that title of the research. The research is really, really interesting and well done. So kudos to you guys on that one. When I think of that, I think emotionally, physically, geographically, mentally, right? All of those different things is Borderless belonging to me. Telling these different stories that connect at a very human level with the athletes that you're seeing is just one step of that. Then reaching people that are, you know, physically not anywhere near you, right? We were chatting about international fandom earlier and international fan engagement. I'm loved the stat about the Americans, you know, using sport now as the most community-oriented component of their lives. I think there's nothing more transcendent than sport. That's one of the things that I talk about all the time. You don't have to speak the same language. You don't even have to understand what's happening on the pitch, on the field, on the ice. If you're sitting in the stands and 50,000 people around you start cheering, you feel it. Like you literally can't not feel that. It's in your soul, right? And so when you think about that and the fans sitting in the gap, you may have been to an event and felt that, but maybe didn't feel that next layer of confidence to communicate about sport or to really invest in sport until you saw a story about Angel Reese, which brought you in deeper. So for us, Borderless belonging is really finding the ways to connect irregardless of what that border is, like I said, mentally, physically, emotionally, geographically, fill in the blank. And that just all comes through storytelling, right? It's not this groundbreaking revelation, but the way that you do storytelling and the stories that you tell is really what ends up setting you apart. People want to connect with people. We've known that forever. I think COVID brought us, you know, right back to that revelation in a much more profound way. And one of the things from the sports perspective that I found to be so interesting is that since COVID, sport has never been more global. and fans of, living in certain countries have never been more open to sports in other countries. So quick throwback to when I was working at the PGA Tour and I was in Australia, got the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time down there. And everybody, the mindset was kind of like, we don't need American football. Like, we have our own sports. Like, we don't need you. We have our own. Right. And I think the American sports fan was just as, pretentious, right? Amongst many other things, probably. But, we were like, Premier League, cool. And now it's like, this country is soccer mad, or global football mad, right? When I was with Vegas Golden Knights, we owned AFC Bournemouth, which was my first tiptoe into Premier League. We would be at the pub literally at 5 a.m. watching matches, and it would be packed. Hundreds of people are there watching, right? And so I think internationally, people are more and more open to international sports stars, and international sports stories. And so this fan gap number, I think we're going to see it sort of continue to grow because I think we're bringing people in on the edges. But I also think you're going to continue to see that number of people that are really sports fans continue to grow at the same pace because we're doing a much better job of connecting.
So just digging into that a touch more, what would you say to brands who feel like, well, sports is just kind of saturated right now, we're going to go elsewhere?
Yeah, I think I said this earlier, but like the sports fan is insatiable. I'm telling you, it's insatiable. So one of the stats that I referenced earlier was our YouTube content had grown over 200%, 600 million video views. We didn't lose engagement rate. 600 million video views, and we had the same engagement rate as what we had, last year when I think we had 45 million video views on a particular piece of platform. So like they're insatiable. So it may be saturated, but it's saturated for a reason. People connect with these brands. Fandom is, resistant to many, many, many things. Like I've worked for teams that have had losing seasons. Guess what? We didn't lose millions of fans just because we lost 11 games and only won 6 last year. That was painful. Much better this year. So it's resistant to a lot of that, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it is busy, but it's busy for a reason. And trust me, there's plenty more room to come on in.
Can I add to that really quick?
Yeah.
I think also you don't have to think about sports in a box. Yeah. Sports is a bridge. And that's what we genuinely believe. That's the philosophy of our brand, is it's a bridge. For example, I like to bring up Sephora a lot. Who would have known Sephora would be one of the best brands investing in sports right now, frankly? I think they were doing a world-class job, and they did it before women's sports was kind of cool and really on the scene, right? And it shows because they're not just investing in one thing, one moment. They're investing in infrastructure, community, content, product, like the full omni-channel experience. And that's truly what it's going to look like for them to win long term.
It's a bit like they bought Bitcoin really early on.
Some might say.
But sports is resistant, so.
So I want to take it on to the next section, which is stories without borders. And Stephanie, you actually touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to look at how big sporting moments, so like the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the World Cup, create this idea of borderless belonging. Specifically, the emotional stories that travel across teams, leagues, and countries, and how to reach those blind spot audiences, maybe that they're in the fan gap or just aren't as culturally connected in the same way, and maybe only dip in for the big occasions. And so, Stephanie, just turning it to you first, when you think about the communities that you're reaching outside of the Bay Area in that enormous fandom that you were describing earlier, in new markets like the UAE and UK and beyond, what stories are traveling best for you? So, and what are those fans telling you about why they're so drawn to the 49ers?
Yeah. We have the amazing blessing of having generational fandom, right? So I was in the UK earlier this year for one of our watch parties around the London games. We didn't play in London, but we always take advantage of the moment. And I was just walking around asking, my team wouldn't put me to work. I was like, can I carry boxes for you? They were like, no, go talk to people. So I was walking around and I was asking people, how did you become a fan of the 49ers? Like, what brought you into this? And the stories ranged from, my father moved here from the United States, and he brought, this is a true story, he brought 2 T-shirts for my brother and myself. And one was a 49er shirt and one was a Miami Dolphin shirt because that's who was good at that time. And he's like, and I was the one that picked right, and there's all of these different stories, right? Actually, one of our broadcasters, Jesus Zarate, he's just a wonderful human being. his grandfather, he grew up in Mexico, and his grandfather had come to the United States to visit, and was doing some work here and bought one of our iconic gold jackets. So again, we talk about that gold helmet. He bought one of the iconic gold jackets and took it home to Mexico. And he wore that thing proudly, which we are so grateful for. I get goosebumps every time I talk about it because I love Jesus so much. And that started Jesus's passion for American football and the San Francisco 49ers. And here he is now. He's our play-by-play broadcaster and Spanish language broadcast every single game. You'll see him around this week. And so those are the stories that we hear when we go into these markets of how people have become fans and how this fandom has grown so significantly. Now what we're trying to create is the new generation of that. So a story that I'll share, Jed York, our principal owner, also owns Leeds United, also in the Premier League. And we have a wonderful partnership with the foundation there. It's called Unlocking Potential. And so it's really our collaboration between football and football. And we have a number of different, elements to it that go from, normal curriculum all the way through sport curriculum. And when we were in the UK last fall, we had a big event or a big kind of moment. We had one of our alumni over there. We had Sourdough Sam there, our mascot, who is beloved all over the world. And we were chatting with some of the kids. They were between 8 and 12 years old. And the coaches were telling me there were 4 girls that were playing flag football. And they said, yeah, these girls have been forced into playing soccer, global football, and they hate it. And they got out of sport for 2 years, and then they found flag football, and now they're voracious. They're on the field every single day. They're some of the biggest advocates. They're some of the best players, and so that to me is when I think about finding the next generation of stories, finding that next generation of integration into the new fan, the future fan, and again all of the statistics that we've talked about in terms of what that means long term.
And I can speak to it too from more of the media side of things and studying what's happening across the leagues. Every single league is thinking global, not just in men's, but in women's sports. You look at some of these players like Naomi Girma, right? Like Trinity Rodman. There are status quos that are being challenged right now. I mean, the Rodman rule, right? Never been seen in the NWSL. And now we're breaking salary cap to keep players here. And these players have global fan bases. And they're going to go overseas. They're going to come back. Same with the WNBA. You're seeing new leagues emerge. Project B, which is really going to be a global league, unrivaled, built by the players, for the fans. There's more competition coming into sports. And player-led platforms are going to be the way to really drive global appeal. Not just here at home, but everywhere around the world. And these players have it. And it is just the beginning.
I'd love to hear more about the player-led platform. I think that's a super interesting emerging thing, maybe driven by like social, and players now have an ability to have a much bigger voice. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I'll name a couple of players that I think have incredible platforms. Obviously, Paige Bueckers. She is really, I think, in a big way, the future of the sport from a rookie perspective. But I also want to call out other players. And I want to speak specifically to Unrivaled, because I think what they have done to really not just focus on signature players, and that's something I would love to challenge all brands to think about, is just because a player doesn't have 1 million followers, maybe they have 30,000 followers, but they have the right followers. That is a really important metric as you think about depth and breadth and building genuine connections. So obviously everybody would want a Serena Williams back in the day, right? And investing in Serena, she's the GOAT. But there are especially because of social media, NIL, the ability to grow your brand earlier and really expand your potential, your story, what you stand for. These players are going to be more powerful than ever before to stand up for their sport, also to stand up for activism. I mean, the WNBA is one of the most activist leagues. What they did for Black Lives Matter, what they're doing now is it's prolific. It goes beyond sports. And I think that is the opportunity for brands to figure out what players have the values that we care about as a brand. They might have really big followings, mid-tier, low-tier. Invest across the board. Don't just look at the signature players. And there are leagues that are doing this well, like Unrivaled.
I love that ability for a brand to be shown to be supporting at all tiers is so important, rather than just trying to get the reach on its own. And it becomes quite sort of inauthentic if that's how they're playing and they're really not thinking about actually how are we really connecting with sports. And like a lot of the things in the research is like, actually, how are we adding back to the fans and the fans' experience and actually the players' experience too?
Yeah, and let me just add one more comment. I also think, and I think the NFL does this quite a bit as well, but the more you can get the players on the ground with fans, that is going to be the future. I know it's hard for these big stars, right? And they get absolutely swarmed by the fans, but you look at, I keep bringing up Unrivaled as an example, and I'd highly recommend just watch a game and see what happens. That fan experience is like nothing I've ever seen before. They have signings with all the players after the games. I mean, when does that happen, right? It seems like so like old school, but it's actually new school. So I think also it's not just the social media piece, but it's how are you putting your talent, your players into the community that really, really matters.
There's actually one of the stats in the report that says that Japanese fans look for how brands are contributing to the players more than how they're contributing to the fan experience, and that's their number one factor when they're looking at brands and how it influences their decision of whether or not to buy, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's something to add to that, right? So going for the superstars, George Kittle, love that guy. He has everything that you think he has when you see him on social. He has built an unbelievable platform with his wife, Claire. Several of our players have, right? Christian McCaffrey and Olivia Culpo. There is something about partnering with them, right? And elevating and connecting to their very personal brand, which I love that. We want them to, they've worked hard for this. They have amazing personalities. And as, a brand perspective, like we're benefiting from the world of people that love these athletes and love these people. But I think to Lauren's point too, of like making sure that you're going across the board, I find it to be most powerful. Of course, I'm going to say this, but genuinely, even without my 49ers hat on, I find it to be most powerful when you're connecting with the athlete and the brand that they're representing, right? Because without one, the other isn't necessarily what it is. An example I love to point to is Toyota. They have a relationship with Brock Purdy. They've used Brock Purdy's relationship and ours to do amazing things. We donated vehicles to service members and Gold Star families this year as part of the holidays, right? So there's a power of it together. And then you see Brock dancing and whatever, he's in the ads on his own, and he's still got his own kind of platform, excuse me, that they've built into. But really, you drive home that connectivity and then the legacy of it, right? And the extension of it ends up following through, I think, more, or as much when the brand is involved as well.
I love that. That's a really great example. Thank you. So I want to move it on to the last section, which I think is one of the things that I think everyone's going to be really keen to hear about here, which is all about the brands that actually belong. So one of the clearest patterns in our research that we've seen is that fans don't really reward brands just for being visible. They notice when a brand actually adds to the ecosystem. We started touching on this already, but it's really about bringing people together, backing stories they care about, giving something that they couldn't get otherwise. And I think the stat on this is amazing, by the way. It's in the US, 62% say that they're more likely to consider a sponsor when it actually leans into a team story and not just slaps a logo on the broadcast. And Lauren, I think your quote is amazing here as well, looking at things from the outside in and creating those shared experiences. So I'd love to come to you first with this, which is, what does it mean for brands to really belong in fandom? And when a brand steps into sport, what should they be thinking about when they want to look to genuinely and authentically add value to that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know the days of white label marketing are no longer. Like spending $1 million just to have your labels showed somewhere is not going to actually translate, I think, into true fandom and true engagement. And, I'm a mom of two. I like to lead with that because I live a very busy life. It's hard for me to make it to stadiums. It's hard for me to spend 2 hours watching a game. Highlights matter, right? And really digestible highlights matter. But I think what's super important and something we're seeing in the women's sports space, especially that is making a huge impact, are community spaces where people can gather to talk about sports, talk about their lives. I am lucky and fortunate enough to live in the home of the Sports Bra in Portland, Oregon, first women's sports bar in the world, now is on a journey to franchise with incredible investors behind them, but also it's led to more innovation in the space. Now you see women's sports bars. I know there's a great one here in San Francisco. If you haven't been, please check it out. But these spaces matter because people like me who can't always make it to the arena, it might be easier for me to take my kids there. So it's really important when brands are coming into these spaces to look at where are all the places and spaces outside in that I need to invest in to really make sure fans at every level feel included and part of our story and that we care, that you matter. And so I think it's flipping the script a lot, right? Because it's expensive to do in real life events. We know that. And I'll give you another quick personal story here that, we've spent 1.5 years building Click Clack. We have over 25,000 followers now. We're a tiny little team, but we're really proud of what we've built. And, growing from the ground up is interesting. I worked for multi-billion-dollar brands. So like, I'm like, wow, I feel very humbled right now. But it's so fascinating. And one of the things that catapulted our brand was we did a free local girls basketball camp in Portland. And we had over 75 girls show up because access to sport is still a really big issue. That got us on the news. That started building our credibility. Now we have partnerships emerging with leagues. And it's those moments that matter the most. It's something so small, something you would never think that will really make an impact. So I would just challenge you all to think about that.
That's
I don't know how to add to that. Hell yeah.
Yeah, so what does it look like from a 49ers point of view, Stephanie? And when a partner really belongs in your fan ecosystem? I mean, you shared Toyota. Have you got any other great examples?
Yeah, we have many examples. We're really lucky in our partnership network. We've got a couple of our friends here from Delta Dental who do a wonderful job, and I think NetApp was here earlier, Gaby. They really bought in with us, right? So last year when I first got here, we kind of took the entire year to learn and see what was working and really what wasn't, and we weren't afraid to sort of break things and then say, hey, this is how we want to move forward. We spoke with all of our partners, and everybody thankfully was like, yeah, we get that. We get what you're saying, Lauren. We get that we need to be a part of the genuine kind of interaction, experiential, community, emotional piece of what sport is. So we do that really well during game day. So Delta Dental, we wanted to make sure that we had fans way more forward in all of our content, all of our production. So now we put fans on the board smiling and having a great time all the time throughout the game. Shockingly, previously, like that was a very small part of what we were doing during game day. They've come on board. It's a very natural connection, right? Now you're seeing people smiling, these great smiles, whatever. Separately, then when we go outside of the stadium, right, then you have all of these different experiences. So one of the things that, we put a lot of strategy into last year was our Faithful Takeover. So we have a huge fan base that loves to travel and take over stadiums. You see a lot of the news about it. Some stadiums we take over a little bit better than others. Some stadiums try to block us out. I'm not going to say any of those ones up in the Northwest, but our fans find a way, right? And they love it. And so this year we said, okay, how are we going to get even more in front of that? So we have a couple partners in Ticketmaster and some others that you would think fit very naturally, but really what they're tying into is this community building. So we do these invasions, as we call them, and we pick a bar somewhere. We went to 4 or 5 different places this year, and we work with all of our fan network presidents. It's a whole community of people, and they travel from all over the world. When we were in New York this year, we had, I think, over 100 people from Germany come. When we were in Houston, we had like 200 people from Mexico City and Monterrey come. They plan their entire season around this. So it does feel very natural for a Ticketmaster or a Zenni Optical to tie into one of those experiential moments. But really what they're tying into is this community building and this like feeling of pride and responsibility that the fan base has taken a hold of. So we started celebrating and telling the world about Faithful Takeover. There was all these metrics. It started picking up steam in the media. We got all of our players and our coaches to start saying thank you and calling it out in post-game, interviews. And it just took on a life of its own because I think people really felt valued and really felt, like I said, this responsibility to just show up for the team. So our team has this incredible saying that they use, IGYB, I got your back. And our fans took this Faithful Takeover moment and was like, hey, we got your back. If you followed the 49ers, you know that we had an unbelievably absurd amount of injuries this year. And somehow the team persisted, right? It was just storybook. It was so inspiring. And so that's where I think, you're tying together this community building. You're showing up in these places that, may or may not be top of mind when you're thinking about tying in with a sports brand. And you're getting into that emotional connectivity and really, layering in very genuinely for what your brand needs and wants as well.
It really feels like you're building like a sort of shared culture for all the brands, for the 49ers, for the faithful, all coming together in this wonderful sort of symbiotic ecosystem.
Absolutely. And I think something that's interesting too that we started dipping our toe into this year, we're going to do a little bit more of next year is, working with Zenni and working with Ticketmaster and doing these more like collectible moments, right? So fans can take pride in saying like, yeah, I got the giveaway, but like I got the giveaway when I was in New York in 2025 and we had this moment. So now they're all branded, they're all dated, they all have these things. Like, again, not groundbreaking thinking, but getting back to simplicity of like how people want to connect with each other and doing just very natural kind of components like that. So yeah, we're going to dip into that a little bit more even next year, I think.
Okay, I think we're getting close to time, but I do have some quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Right.
Okay.
Bring it.
So, this is hard to say, by the way. Rivalry Rewired or Heated Rivalry?
Well, if you listen to my podcast, you're going to know I'm going to say heated rivalry. So might stay through the weekend now that I know that they're going to be here. So
My answer is just yes. I love it all.
Okay, Benson Boone or Bad Bunny?
I know. How do you pick? Yes. I mean, yes. I love both of them. Benson Boone's going to be here in a couple nights, but Bad Bunny, I cannot freaking wait to see that show. It's going to be epic.
definitely Bad Bunny. His Grammy speech is going to go on record as, I think, one of the best Grammy speeches of our decade. So, yeah.
Seattle Seahawks or the Patriots?
I hope Levi's Stadium wins. Because that means everybody's had a great time. And we put on a hell of a show.
I gotta go Seahawks, everybody. I'm a Pacific Northwest girl. I love the Niners, though. I was telling Stephanie, my best friend's a Niners fan. So, but the Pacific Northwest, I will say, do not underestimate the power of sports in the Pacific Northwest. There is a ton of money. Women's sports are going to be huge here. So let's go Seahawks.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause